Hello, this is Bishop, and this is a test of Autopilot version 2019.32 9d0d19a. So today we are doing a little bit of nav on Autopilot testing. I apologize, it's been a while since I put out a new video. The main reason for that is because I've just mainly been waiting for the next version of, let's get into this HOV lane and we'll talk about what happens in these HOV lanes in a sec. Been waiting for the next version of Autopilot to come out. Been waiting for Smart Summon. I've been waiting for V10. These features keep promising to be right around the corner, and they keep not happening, unfortunately. I am a full self-driving purchaser, so I am supposed to be in the early access program. I never got an invitation for early access. A coworker of mine, who actually purchased a car later than mine, he also purchased full self-driving. He did actually get his invitation to early access, but based on his experiences, he's not getting any of these versions any faster than anybody else is, and he certainly doesn't have any of the non-widely released features that everybody's waiting for, that you see the occasional YouTube video pop up of, such as things like Smart Summon, for instance, or the V10 UI, or the updated visualizations. So today we're just doing a nav on Autopilot test. My destination is about 13 miles from where I am right now, and I wanted to talk about some of the observations that I have noticed in the last few versions that I've gotten. So one thing that we got in the absolute most recent version, the one that I'm running right now, which is the key fob security update. When doing the key fob security update, I noticed one kind of interesting thing. My main key fob, the one that I use primarily, that I had replaced at one point in time, took the update just fine. It said key fob v2 update blah blah blah. The other key fob that I attempted to update on my Tesla Model S late 2016 hardware 2 car was one of the original key fobs that I was provided with the car. That one said key fob v1 already up to date. At the time, I thought maybe this was something wrong, the v1, v2 indicating that that was the software version of the key fob that was being updated. But then after I did a little bit more testing, I realized that it's actually a version difference in the key fob hardware itself. I'm pretty sure V1 refers to an older key fob versus V2 refers to a newer key fob. It's not actually talking about the software version that it updated to or updated from. So my V2 key fob received an update. My V1 key fob, my original key fob that I was provided with when I purchased the car, did not receive an update, and it said that it was already updated. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about in this video too is nav on Autopilot's, at least for this area, inability to deal with HOV lanes. So it just sees this as I was on a single lane road. Now it sees it as I'm on the very, very far left-hand side, and now it thinks it's gotten me out of the passing lane. In reality, I'm still in the passing lane. It just got me out of the HOV lane, so I'm going to get over one more lane. And we're going to follow the route and we're going to see what it does from a lane change perspective. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't quite understand this highway as well as it should, so I expect that it's probably going to jump us back over into the left lane to follow route, even though it doesn't technically need to. Another thing that I've noticed in the last couple versions of the Tesla firmware that have been uploaded or downloaded were that now, when I'm driving on specifically designated HOV lanes that are separate from the actual main highway section, of which we don't really have a ton of those in the Denver metro area. You know, this lane that we've got on the left-hand side can very easily be misinterpreted as just basically part of the same highway, which I mean, technically it is. But we have a timed north-south HOV lane for the I-25 corridor in the Denver metro area. All right, let's see what it does with this merging traffic. Alright, well, we have plenty of room, so it didn't really have to do anything. And that HOV lane is a lane that it doesn't really know how to deal with. And in fact, actually, since they added in the nav on Autopilot originally, I've noticed that the car generally does not understand that lane, and it doesn't recognize when I am in that lane. Like, it will act from a navigation perspective as though I am, say for example, I'm in the northbound HOV lane, which is the same lane, just different times of day. So it'd be, I think it's after 11 a.m. it becomes a northbound lane. So if I'm northbound on that lane, it will act as though I am on normal northbound I-25, and it'll instruct me to get over to the left or get over to the right appropriately, or try and make lane changes based on me being on the main highway, not being on the HOV lanes. If I zoom in on the map, it will show the main highway selected in blue as the chosen route, and then it will show my car off to the left of what that chosen route is, basically. So it seems like it thinks I'm either the navigation is messing up or that I'm not actually driving on a road. It's just approximating me to the closest road. Oh, hey, look, Model 3. So what I've noticed in the most recent versions, though, is that if I get onto this HOV lane and it sees that I'm not driving on a road that it recognizes for usually about a minute, Nav on Autopilot actually completely disables itself. It'll very consistently say, navigate on Autopilot, features unavailable for the remainder of the drive, maybe re-enabled. I'm sure you've seen the message pop up at least once or twice. Usually it happens more in bad weather. But yeah, Nav on Autopilot actually will completely disable itself while I'm in that HOV lane. Sometimes it comes back when I get onto a normal road, but a lot of times it does not resume until I park and start the car up again. So, as far as the Nav on Autopilot, that we're seeing right now, the general Autopilot, everything seems like it's going fine. One thing that I've noticed it still struggles with a little bit is when you are on an on-ramp lane that is merging with an existing lane. It will recognize that it needs to get out of the lane that it's in, but if the lane that it's in ends while it's trying to do the lane change maneuver, sometimes it'll actually keep doing that lane change maneuver and it'll take you over an extra lane. It still does that even in the latest version. So here we're doing a speed-based lane change, just as I would expect it to. I'm going to speed up just a smidge, so I'm going with the flow of traffic. Be a little faster here, since we're in the passing lane. Okay, I'm not impeding anyone who is behind us. I'm going to go ahead and get back over though, because I don't want to keep going this fast. Okay, so oops, oh, my bad. Okay. Didn't realize that was the exit lane, so my mistake. Alright, so I've gotten back over, sped back up. So yeah, it's actually right. It was correct on this one. This is no longer the passing lane because the HOV lane ends. That turns into, okay, and now it wants to get over into that one because it sees from a distance that I'm actually going faster than that traffic as well. Although the speed limit's going to drop here shortly, and in the interest of not getting pulled over, they do set up speed traps here from time to time. Okay, to notch it back down a little bit. So, one thing that I have noticed, besides the lane joining behavior that I was talking about, although the visualization actually seems like it's a lot better, I've noticed that it gives a more accurate, in the last two versions I think, a more accurate representation of what wide and merging lanes look like, even though it still doesn't do an awesome job of dealing with it. Another thing that I've noticed is, and this happened 3 or 4 versions ago, and you can see that the car is slowing down because of the car ahead of me. The tailing distance has been significantly increased from earlier versions. This right now is actually set up on a tailing distance of 1. And you can see that it's maintaining a pretty respectable gap between myself and the car ahead of me. Granted, we are traveling at over 70 miles an hour, so this is a safe tailing distance, but it doesn't seem to allow you to set a tailing distance that would not necessarily be safe at highway speed anymore. I wish See, but here's something that Nav on Autopilot just isn't quite smart enough to realize. It's like, I didn't want to get behind a truck. I would have preferred to actually pull ahead of this guy, so I'm going to manually tell it. But still not coming off Autopilot, so it's not that bad. I'm going to manually tell it to get back over to the left, and then it's telling me to get over to the right to follow the route, even though technically that is not necessary. Both of these lanes will actually take me to where I'm going. And let's watch what happens if this turn's coming up a little fast. I'm going to notch it down 5. But it should realize that this highway is ending, and it's actually turning into a normal road here shortly. So let's see what it does. Should at least recognize that speed limit drop. Come on. Okay, I'm going to notch it down manually a bit. Yeah, it hasn't... It's still treating it as a highway road. The Nav on Autopilot line is still there. Okay, here we go. Nav on Autopilot ending. Yeah, I probably should have ended a while back there. But at least it does recognize it. Yep, there goes the Nav on Autopilot, and now we are down to normal Autopilot. I'm going to get over one lane. I love that it does these lane changes even when it's slow. Oh, come on, you can do it. I'm going to tap the accelerator a little bit because I wanted to stop ahead of that car. No, come on. Pressing the accelerator. There we go. Yeah, sometimes it stops a little bit further away from the cars than I think it necessarily should. But we'll do some city surface street driving here and see how it goes. Okay, pretty decent response time picking up from the car ahead of me moving. That's good. That's one of the areas that sometimes it's lagged in. where when you're at a stop, say for example a stoplight, the cars ahead of you start moving. Sometimes the autopilot is a little bit sluggish to get going. Okay, this guy's getting in. Does not respond to the turn signal, but it does respond to the car getting in front of me. More often than not, when I'm on the highway and I have to take over for autopilot or nav on autopilot, the most common reason that I have to do that is because a car would like to get into my lane and I'm trying to let them in. I know that the visual machine learning is supposed to be able to pick up on things like turn signals, and that it does do that from time to time, but I still find that if there's a gap and I'm accelerating to close that gap based on my set speed, if a car in an adjacent lane turns on the turn signal to indicate that they want to change into my lane, it doesn't generally seem to respond to that. It will still accelerate to close that gap. I am going to take over for nav and autopilot here because this is a photo red light and it will ticket me if I try to rush through it. So yeah, still waiting on all these new features. You know, nav on autopilot's great, but I still want to see some enhancements to it. A lot of the highway exits that it doesn't seem to understand still it struggles with. I know that in one of the most recent press conferences in which they were talking about, like, you know, full self-driving and AI and the future of it, you know, Elon specifically said that the car has to be able to focus on what it sees more than its GPS data, because the GPS data can be out of date, it can be inaccurate, there could be construction, there could be any number of things. So far right now, the car still seems very heavily focused on GPS data. In instances where the location of an exit has shifted because there's construction, in instances where just the GPS data wasn't necessarily accurate in the first place, or the car didn't understand where the exit was, like, it still makes mistakes there. Not heinous mistakes, I mean, it's not like it's, you know, trying to swerve me into a median or anything, but it will do things like miss an exit or miss a highway interchange. And then at other times, you know, and again, like, it's based very heavily on location. It works perfectly fine. Like, it does a pretty good job weaving in and out of traffic. All right, now I'm gonna have to manually accelerate up and get to where some lane lines are. That set speed's a bit high for this road. Yeah, and for some reason, I mean, there's still roads that, even though technically surface streets, it's only supposed to cap you at 5 miles per hour above the speed limit. It doesn't seem to do that, even though it recognizes that it's not a highway. Like, it's not giving me a nav on autopilot option right now, but it's also not capping me at 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. And that's something, ever since they enabled, you know, full speed auto steer on local roads, that's something that I've noticed in various capacities, and I know which roads around my house are like that and which ones aren't. And even on the same road, it may not be like that consistently across the entire road. It may just be individual sections where it does or does not cap you. Okay, so this guy's getting in front of me, gonna let it. Okay. I'll let autopilot handle it, and it got a little close. I was really ready on the brake there, but it never got to a point that I felt like I needed to intervene. I am still set to 1 for the tailing distance, so this is how much of a gap it's leaving between me and the car ahead of me. Hello, BMW Roadster. Yeah, it's doing fine through here. Stopped car detection generally does seem like it's a lot better. I still am wary of it when traveling at highway speed when I'm coming up on completely stopped traffic, but that's just good common sense, I think. And as long as the cars in front of me are stopping, so stop for the guy in the crosswalk, or the lady I should say, as long as the cars ahead of me are stopping, I don't have to take over for auto steer. As long as I'm not the one who has to stop at the crosswalk or at the stoplight itself. A little bit of a gap here. Yes, it's a big gap. But, you know, not crazy unacceptable. It would just, I would like to see it hug tighter, especially in heavy traffic like this, to the next car up. Let's see how we do when we get to the stoplight. Constantly watching for cars to dart into my lane. That's the thing that I'm generally, I mean, even just driving myself, not even necessarily when I'm babysitting autopilot. Generally, the thing that I am most concerned about on city street driving, especially on, I mean, these aren't terribly narrow streets. Denver's much worse. Is a car to, unexpectedly suddenly jump over into my lane as I'm passing slower traffic. Somebody who just doesn't check their mirror adequately or doesn't check their blind spot, they want to get out of their slower lane and get into the faster lane, can very suddenly and unexpectedly get in front of you and give you very little time to react. That's the thing that I always am concerned about for Autopilot, as well as for myself just as a driver. So here we go with green light again. I'm still not touching any controls. I haven't had any reason to intervene since we started going from the red light over at Arapahoe. Again, it's leaving a fairly sizable gap. My set speed is, okay, now it's capped at 5 miles per hour above the speed limit, but my set speed is 40. And my tailing distance is still set to 1. I'll confirm to 1. Yep. Can't look at it without changing it, so I have to change it to 2 just to change it back to 1. And it seems like it's doing fine through here. Yeah, I mean, for all the complaints that I have about little things that Autopilot does and doesn't do, like the core functionality of auto steer and lane keeping and braking and acceleration. All right, let's see what it does in this. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Start slowing down at a very respectable distance. The core functionality of auto steer and lane keeping and braking and acceleration, like, they honestly work really well. I mean, unless lane markings get super crazy, in which case the car will usually give you, sirens and be like, hey, I'm panicking because I don't exactly know what's going on. Please grab the wheel and take over, which I've had happen a couple times. Occasionally there'll be some weird intersection where it just has a little trouble with the lane markings. And not only does it say, give you the knack to say, hey, put your hands back on the wheel, but it'll actually go so far as to say, oh no, I'm done. I am completely disengaging auto steer. Please put your hands on the wheel. Okay, now I'm done. At which point, if you don't do that, then basically it's just going to roll to a stop, essentially, because it's no longer on auto steer. But the core, aspect of what Autopilot is, minus, the navigation and these new features that they're trying to work on, and, the stuff that we're going to get with Smart Summon, like, that stuff all actually works very well. I don't really, I've literally never had an instance in which auto steer did something crazy like try and steer me over the double yellow line into oncoming traffic, or swerve unexpectedly. Like, the worst thing that I ever see it do is sometimes on the highway, phantom braking, either because it's overly aggressively braking for merging traffic from like a highway on-ramp, which I know people have reported on the forums, or occasionally just misdetecting a bridge, and I'll be going 75 and all of a sudden drops down to 55, and that's not great. But, I've not, even those circumstances are usually pretty rare. I'm going to notch my speed up a little bit since the speed limit has increased. But I mean, stuff like this, it just works. And it has been working very well for a long time. I've even had instances where, I've seen 90-degree left turns at a T intersection where the Autopilot basically just following those lane lines, goes ahead and makes sharp turns like that. And it never would have done that in the older versions because it never would have turned sharply or aggressively enough to do that. And now it's much more aggressive about making little tiny micro corrections to make sure that you stay in your lane. It seems like it's a lot less sweeping with the turn controls. Still not awesome at the lane centering thing. I had the issue a while back, but things are constantly getting better. And with every new version, that seems like there's a difference in the behavior. I'll keep posting videos, and we'll just see how it goes. And this is my turn coming up. I'm going to have to take over for it manually, and that'll probably be the end of this drive. So I'd say this is a good point to call it. So thanks for watching.